Hi, I'm Jonathan Weinberg, and this is Drawing with Fountain Pens. Recently, I was talking about my most expensive fountain pen that I'd recently gotten, the Rishi Pilot custom pen. But today I want to actually talk about some inexpensive pens, not only inexpensive, really some of the least expensive pens that I have. And it really points to the way in which this hobby, if you call it that, this fountain pen obsession, you don't need a lot of money to get involved. Here's the Pilot Kakuno fountain pen, and I was able to get this for under $10. This is the Kaweco Perkeo fountain pen, and I was able to get this one for under $14. But you can see how similar these two pens are, and the question I suppose, is which one is better, or are they both good? I particularly was attracted to the Perkeo one recently because I love things that are yellow, and I like the fact that it was this two-tone. It's interesting to me too that I think really imitating Pilot, that they've gone for this two-tone look. Now again, you can see how similar these two pens are. They're both made of plastic resin. They're both quite light in terms of how much they weigh. They both have caps that click, that snap on and off. They're both two-toned. You see that they both have these holes here because they are geared towards children, and I think that's because, believe it or not, I suppose some child might stick this in their mouth and choke, so it makes it so that there's an air hole here. So neither of these pens can be used as eyedropper pens. So that's very similar. Size-wise, even though these are geared towards kids, they're not tiny pens. Here's the Pilot Metropolitan, and you see that they are similar in size to that pen. Both pens post really securely. In terms of sizes, the Perkeo is a bit bigger when it's closed, and it is 5 3/8 long, closed. But when it's open and posted, it is 6 1/8, which is really fine for a grown-up. So if you're someone who likes full-size pens, you like the Kaweco nib, but you like full-size pens, this is an interesting choice because, as you can see, the Perkeo is much bigger than the Kaweco Sport, right? When it's open, which is only, the Kaweco Sport is only about 5 inches long. Size-wise, I've already mentioned that the Kakuno pen is a bit shorter than the Perkeo. Here it is just a little bit longer than 5 inches, maybe 5 1/16, and then when it is posted, it is much longer, 6 and almost 6, about 6 1/8, 6 1/4 inches long. The Perkeo pen is 13.5 grams, 13.4 grams. Unposted, it would be 8 and almost 9 grams. The Kakuno is almost 13 grams. Without the cap, it is 9.2 grams. And just to give you some comparisons, the Metropolitan is 25 grams, 25.5 grams. It's a metal pen. And the Safari pen, which is plastic also is almost 17 grams. So these pens are very light. Now, here's where there's certain differences. One thing I think is very nice about the Pilot pen is the transparent feed, so you can see the ink pouring into the feed. I enjoy that. I think that's very nice. The Pilot pen, I don't know how you feel about this, but it has a little smiley face on it. Again, I think to appeal to kids. It has its name on here. Kakuno actually means to write, so that makes sense, has a name. Where the Perkeo has the indentations, so you know exactly where to hold it in your hand. I think this is particularly aimed for students, you know, to sort of help them hold the pen exactly right. The Pilot doesn't do that, which I actually, in a way, prefer. But it's interesting that the cap comes in at the top here, and I think that maybe is the idea that that will make it more comfortable. It is very comfortable. I think it's more comfortable because of the shiny surface, the polished surface, which makes it feel less plasticky than the surface of the Perkeo, which seems more insubstantial. I guess it's softer and more, but more toy-like. There's another very subtle thing, which is that there's this little protrusion, which I guess acts like a roll stop, and I'm not quite sure why you need that, given the fact that these are faceted and they really don't roll easily on the desk. But this keeps it, I suppose, in absolute place. Perkeo is a reference to a jester in King Charles Philip of Heidelberg's court, who lived in the early 18th century and is a kind of mascot, I guess, or hero of Heidelberg. Kaweco originally was a Heidelberg company. One other nice difference, I think this is something Doodlebud pointed out, is that when you take the Perkeo pen apart and you screw the barrel again, it clicks into place, and that's very nice. It's obviously very carefully engineered. It also, I guess, for kids, like the Safari pen, makes you hold the pen in a particular way. It's a little more emphatic about that than the Pilot pen. When you take it apart and you screw it back together, it doesn't have that same stop to it, so you could screw it so tight that you actually crack the barrel. When you open the pens up, it's surprising how similar they are. They both use cartridges. They will use converters, but you have to buy that separately. The Pilot pen uses Pilot's own cartridges, which actually I really like, but they're proprietary to Pilot, and that's true too, of course, of its own converters. Kaweco uses international style cartridges, so that's a difference, and we'll use either a Kaweco converter, which tend to be a little pricey. They can be like $11, $12, or you can use a so-called international style converter. But you have to be careful. I've noticed that some converters don't work. I've had some Chinese converters, for example, that'll work on this pen that are so-called international converters. I've noticed that the Pelican converters will work, but those are expensive. So this whole term international can be actually kind of problematic because sometimes it depends on the exact size, et cetera, whether they will fit. Here's another option. This is the Kakuno demonstrator version of their pen, which I think is really cool. You can see it here with the converter. And then you have this whole, then you can really see the ink and then how the ink flows. And I think that's really, really nice. But I would say that that it is true that the Perkeo also comes in a demonstrator version. I don't own that, so I can't show that to you, in 3 dimensions. I can show you a picture of what it looks like. But I've never tried the demonstrator version. I will say that when I've looked for the price of that version online, I think the cheapest price that I could find was under $18 for the Perkeo demonstrator version, while this is also under $10. So if you like demonstrators and that's really important to you, but you also want to be frugal about it, this is the better deal, I guess, in terms of the price. So it really comes down to the way you think these look as pens and how they write. I think in both cases, the interesting thing is that you are getting a nib that is on some of their more expensive pens. Now, on the web, I noticed that there are comparisons of these pens with Lami's Safari, and that's a little bit like apples and oranges, because the Safari is going to cost you anywhere from $20 to $30, so that's not really a fair comparison. Here's another interesting aspect. As far as I know, with the Pilot Kakuno, maybe somebody will put in the comments that this isn't true, but basically you could get a converter for it, but that's as much as you can customize it. But in the case of the Perkeo pen, like a lot of Kaweco's pens, you can get a clip that you can attach to the pen for another $10, $12. And if that's important to you, then you can add a clip to it. And that's similar to the Kaweco Sport, which also doesn't come with a converter. It comes with a cartridge, but you can add a converter and you can add the clip. And so you can sort of customize it, and you can decide if you want a gold clip or a black clip. So that's a little different, and it's interesting. I think that, again, the way in which these pens are marketed to kids, that a lot of kids think that the whole idea of clipping a pen to your pocket is kind of nerdy looking, or it used to be thought of as nerdy. I don't know what the status is now, but that probably isn't important. I will say that one thing that is true, particularly of Pilot pens, that is kind of amazing, is the way in which when you use them and you put the caps on it, that you can come back to the pen and it will still write. And I think that's fairly true about Kaweco too, that they both have done a really good job of thinking in terms of how these pens are going to be used in the real world. Pilot in particular, I think, has experience with this because they make disposable pens, and disposable pens really do, fountain pens, and they really have to perform. And I have Pilot Varsity disposable pens that I have not used for 4 or 5 months, and you open them up and they still write. Looking at the demonstrator, you can see part of the reason for that is because they have this very excellent inner cap that is keeping the pen wet. And that, of course, ruins a little bit of the demonstrator effect because you can't see the nib, but it's worth it because it keeps the nib wet. Now, in terms of longevity, both of these pens are made out of seemingly very lightweight plastic, acrylic resins, I guess. So I'm not sure how long these things will last. If you were to step on them or if you were to screw them together too tightly, they might crack. If I'm looking on the web, I see that particularly the demonstrator version of these pens is likely to be more fragile. But then again, they are so inexpensive, and the other great thing about them is if you lose them, you don't feel like it's a terrible thing. Now I'm going to do a writing sample, and I'm going to draw with both pens, one of my dahlias that I grow in the garden. But just as a conclusion, I felt when I was drawing in particular that the Pilot pen is better made. It feels better in the hand. in terms of the material. And then when I was drawing, it holds together better. Literally, I felt a kind of weird clicky feel when I was using the Perkeo pen. It felt cheaper, like a toy, while the Kakuno pen really does feel nice in the hand. I was also surprised that when I was drawing with it on the paper, which was the Strathmore paper, that actually it drew very freely and wet. So paper always, of course, makes a big difference. So if you're really into Kaweco nibs, then the Perkeo is going to be better for you. But I thought for drawing, the Pilot pen was better. And it might be that for writing, you might prefer the Perkeo over the Pilot. They're both very inexpensive, and so the good news is that it's not that bad to buy both of them and have both as part of your pen collection. As always, if you find this useful, please subscribe. It's the way to support the channel, and it's absolutely free. So how do these pens write? This is the Kaweco Perkeo. And I see this is a kind of black, might be dark blue cartridge. And this is rodeo paper. And this is a medium nib. Like all of the Kaweco pens, I see that it's really dark blue. So I think this is a royal blue. Basically, there's very little line variation, just a little bit, I would say. And it writes fairly smooth. It's reasonably wet. I would say it's a little bit on the dry side, but it's okay. Writes nicely. I mean, it writes like a Kaweco. So if you're somebody who loves Kaweco nibs, this is the pen for you. I like the Kaweco broad. I'm not sure that the Perkeo comes in a broad. I've only seen it available as a, extra fine and a medium. But it maybe it does. Maybe you're able to get it. So it writes nicely. So this is the Pilot Kakuno. I think there's a little O there. And this is a Pilot blue cartridge. And it's rodeo paper. And it is medium. I think you'll see right away that the Pilot medium is a little finer than the Kaweco medium. And there is even less line variation than the Kaweco nib. And it's even drier. Now here is where I think the Kaweco shines. I think that the Kaweco writes better. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. The Pilot is a little sharper, it has a little more feedback into this. You can do reverse writing with it. It's not that terrible. I want to just look. at the line widths. You see the Perkeo line width is a little thicker, which for writing and journaling I think is better. I mean, they're close. I would say that the Kaweco is a little smoother, it's a little wetter. I prefer it slightly more than I prefer the Pilot. Typically, I love Pilot nibs, but not so much on the low end. But I think this is quite. It's passable. It's not terrible, but it's not as smooth. And also keep in mind that it's a little thinner, and the finer a line is, the more likely it is to be less smooth. So that's something to keep in mind.